I'm currently the Acting Regional Director of UNISA Western Cape at the Parow campus, for those of you who are not familiar with UNISA in Cape Town. So, in the spirit of the multilingualist, Dr. Neville Alexander, I'm going to try and greet you in some different languages. And I'm going to start here in the Western Cape. Molweni nonke, which means goeienaand almal. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sanbonani, Dumelang, Lekai, Assalamu alaikum. And then I'm going to try this one that I just learned today. Maybe there are some colleagues that can assist me. Dimacheloni. All right, so that was good evening in Tsivenda. So, and then for our colleagues on the east of the continent, Jambo Africa. All right, so I'm really hoping that those words were those greetings that you're going to settle in and that you're going to enjoy this evening with us and that you will leave the evening a little bit richer because, you know, like some people would say, tonight you are going to be introduced to some of the timber and caliber of South Africa, all right? I'm just thinking of our keynote speaker, Professor Mohale. I was a little bit starstruck when I met him this evening because it's somebody that I only listen to on YouTube. That is how close I get to him. So you can imagine my joy this evening that I am meeting this man because, like I said to him earlier this evening, nowadays there's a lot of cleverness around and there's a lot of knowledge around. But when it comes to wisdom, when it comes to the depth of knowledge, of insight, of strategy, because wisdom is a combination of knowledge and culture, right? It is when we know who we are and where we come from, combined with knowledge, that is when we reach some kind of wisdom. So with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the 12th annual memorial lecture of Neville Alexander. And I can't believe that it is the 12th annual memorial lecture. So, ladies and gentlemen, what will happen this evening is we will start now with a corporate video. So that will go for a few minutes. And then that will be followed by our esteemed Vice-Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it here, so she will welcome us and she will share some of her wisdom. She will connect to us virtually online. Then that will be followed by a music item. After that, I will then introduce my colleague, Dr. Zamangwana Kanhile. She is the Senior Counselor, Career Counseling and Development at the Parow campus, Western Cape Region, UNISA. And then Dr. Kanhile will then introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Bonang Mohale. That will then, following the keynote speaker, that will then be followed by inputs from our discussants, and our discussants are none other than two UNISA academics, Professor Evaristo Benyeira. He is Professor of African Politics, Department of Political Science at UNISA. And the second discussant is Professor Patience Mudau, and she is the Acting COD, Department of Curriculum and Instructional Studies, UNISA. That will then be followed by a Q&A, question and answer, and then followed by the vote of thanks, which will be offered by our Acting Deputy Registrar, Professor Moroka Mohashwa. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You are welcome.
Whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. However improbable it may sound to the skeptics, Africa will prosper.
More than anything, UNISA must be celebrated as a pioneer of the distance education model, an enduring gift not only to South Africa, the continent, but to the human civilization in the knowledge arena the world over.
Education is the light in a dark room. It's the spark of a dream, a passport to the future, and the seed of generational change. Through education, we reflect on yesterday and define tomorrow. Rooted in South Africa and the African continent, UNISA can truly claim to be the African university in the service of humanity. UNISA stands at the pinnacle of education through open distance e-learning, with a footprint of students in more than 100 countries worldwide. Since the founding of the university in 1873 as an examining body, we have been a trailblazer. To this end, UNISA is working on the following catalytic niche areas. Marine studies. As a discipline, marine studies covers field-specific studies like marine ecology and biology, to policy-related studies like marine spatial planning and coastal economies. Many other areas of marine research and studies are covered in this niche area. Aviation and aeronautical studies. Aviation and aeronautical studies covers specializations in areas as diverse as aeronautical engineering and aerospace safety, and South Africa's 18 airports forms a major role player for passengers and goods transitioning to and from our country. This is a niche that supports a major component of the country's economy. Automotive studies. The South African automotive industry is projected to grow from 600,000 to 1.4 million vehicles a year in production. There is major potential to be explored in UNISA's commitment to automotive studies. In 2022, students from the Department of Mechanical Engineering participated in the Sasol Solar Challenge with their solar-powered car that travels from Johannesburg to Cape Town without using a single drop of fuel. Energy studies. UNISA's Institute for Development of Energy for African Sustainability specializes in designing chemical processes, reducing material and energy consumption, as well as carbon dioxide emissions. Space studies and Square Kilometer Array. UNISA has been extensively involved in the $1 billion Square Kilometer Array project since 2012. The UNISA Observatory, situated on the main campus, is a modern, well-equipped facility housing a 14-inch telescope where the College of Science, Engineering and Technology offers undergraduate courses in astrophysics and astronomy with specialization up to PhD level. Fourth Industrial Revolution and Digitalization. The fourth industrial revolution can be described as the advent of cyber-physical systems, involving entirely new capabilities for people and machines. Examples include genome editing and new forms of machine intelligence. The College of Graduate Studies will support and promote studies into 4IR and digitalization, while the Graduate School of Business Leadership presents a short learning program on big data. Natural sciences. The simplest definition of biotechnological studies is applied biology. Through the application of biological knowledge and techniques to develop products or services, UNISA's College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences is one of the main partners in the African Biogenome Project, a coordinated Pan-African effort piloting a project with a key objective of sequencing 100,000 endemic species. Health and/or pharmaceutical studies. The Department of Health Studies is prepared for the challenge of equipping their students with research skills and expertise in the field of health and pharmaceutical studies. The UNESCO UNISA Africa Chair in Nanoscience and Nanotechnology is leading the international research into the nano-delivery of medicinal drugs, including African herbal medicine. The College of Law offers an elective undergraduate model on medical law. Feminist, womanist, Wusadi theorizations. In the College of Human Sciences, the Institute for Gender Studies, the College of Education and the Graduate School of Business all contribute to the interdisciplinary research into eliminating gender-based violence, homophobia and transphobia, and discrimination against women in the workplace and the political arena. The Institute also uses education about gender as an effective way to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women. Student support and co-curricular activities. UNISA is uniquely placed to offer creative and radically innovative ways of enhancing student support. UNISA's College of Graduate Studies has developed a whole range of training programs to assist and encourage students. The Advocacy and Resource Center for Students with Disabilities promotes the principle of access for success, and the Student Development Division provides students with social support and leadership development services. These niche areas find expression in the rich tapestry of our disciplines included in the College of Accounting Sciences, Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, Economic and Management Sciences, Education, Graduate Studies, Human Sciences, Law, Science, Engineering and Technology, the Graduate School of Business Leadership, and the Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs. As Africa's leading open distance e-learning university, we can reflect with great pride on the past 150 years of transformational education, and we are confident in our ability to succeed and become a truly high-performance university as we define tomorrow.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will now put your hands together to welcome the welcome address of our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula.
Program Director, good evening.
Good evening.
May I inquire from you whether you're able to see us or for us to...
Yes, Professor, we can hear you and we can see you.
You can hear. Okay.
She's gone now.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
yes.
There we go.
Is it possible for... Thank you very much, Program Director, Dr. Johnson. Let me take this opportunity to welcome and recognize the participation of our Chancellor, His Excellency President Mbeki, and the patron of the TM School. Let me also recognize our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Bonang Mohale, who's also the Chancellor of the University of Free State and a leading light in business, but also in the questions of leadership in our society, in business, and in the global arena. May I request a round of applause from all of us who are in attendance virtually and in person. Let me recognize the members of Council of the University of South Africa, chaired by Dr. Diao Musia, Professor Moloko Siputa, and members of MENCOM here present, including those participating virtually. Extended management of the University of South Africa, all academics, administrative staff, and professionals. And of course, no university operates on its own, and therefore we'd like to recognize Professor Musa Mashebela, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, and congratulate him on his recent appointment in this important role. Can we also give him a round of applause? Colleagues, we recognize Mr. MC Nkuhlu, Nedbank CEO, Professor Sputa, who will also take over just to augment some of my inputs into this. Let me also recognize the members who will be participating in the program. They've already been acknowledged by the program director, and therefore I will have to skip them. Members of the Diplomatic Corps in attendance. Members of the Diplomatic Corps in attendance here tonight, but as well as those participating virtually. Representatives from the national, provincial, and local government present. Representatives from sister institutions of higher education. His Excellency Dr. G.K. Rakhudu, Traditional Leadership of the Royal Bafokeng Nation, Tsitsing Khotlaya Rakhudu, Lekoketso Rakhudu Foundation. Members of the business community present here today, Ms. MP Kumalo, SRC President, and all members of SRC representing all student structures and the primary stakeholders of the university, the students from whom we are to serve. Let me request the Speaker, as well as members of Parliament present, members of the Friends of the University of South Africa present, distinguished members of the audience, and it would be remiss of us not to recognize the family that has allowed us to celebrate and honor a key iconic leader, a literary scholar, a person committed to the languages, but also to global social justice, including the formation and strengthening of democracy. Karen Press, who is the partner of our celebrant, Neville Alexander, Doctor. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you all to the 12th Neville Alexander Memorial Lecture hosted by the Western Cape hub of the University of South Africa. I want to start by apologizing that I would have loved to have been with you in person, but due to ill health, I've not been able to join you. But as they say, technology and science become mediating elements to help us to overcoming distance. And therefore, I'm privileged and appreciative that I will join you via virtual systems. And therefore, thank you to all colleagues who have made this possible. As the university, the memorial lecture takes place when the University of South Africa celebrates 151 years of our existence. We are proud of our footprint, not only on the African continent, but also in the rest of the world. Program Director, we are only South African university that has physical presence outside UNISA and seen as a science diplomat of our country. Our learning center in Addis Ababa is one example that testifies to this important imperative. The memorial lecture resonates with our theme for this year, Reclaiming Africa's Intellectuals in the Past 150 Years and Beyond. And we indeed here this evening to celebrate one of the intellectual giants of our country, continent, a literary giant that did not limit his horizon to South Africa only, but ensured that the African voices in the formation of literary studies, languages, the place of social justice, the investments that are required to enhancing sciences using languages of Africa as languages of science is being celebrated. This hero of the continent has had the honor of being home to the University of South Africa, and him, Neville Alexander, has been an inspiration to generations of African intellectual thought leaders. For the 12th time in a row, UNISA finds itself playing a host at this auspicious gathering that takes place in the mother city, Cape Town, every year since 2013 to pay homage to one of the respected struggle veterans, an intellectual giant ever produced by our country. It is thus pleasing to the eye and indeed warming to the heart to see that even this year we have remained loyal and have responded in droves to the clarion call to descend in honor of Dr. Alexander. We're quite appreciative, Professor Mohale, that you have agreed to lead our thought system and our ideas and reflections around this important icon, because it is quite imperative that memory is a constant struggle against forgetting. The idea of going back to engage in the exercise of rememory, to borrow Toni Morrison's phrase, is to engage with our being, social reproduction, the construction of society and its future, and the contribution of knowledge in resourcing our future's thinking. When we take time to remember and see the world through the eyes of the works of Professor Alexander, I'd like to quote, "We are constantly creating and recreating the past, arranging and rearranging it, drawing on individual and collective experiences, and in so doing, we are creating the kind of futures we want, the kind of futures we wish for, the kind of futures which will protect future generations and the sustainability of humanity." This lecture has been conceptualized to honor the life and work and lasting legacy of Dr. Neville Alexander, and amongst others, to acknowledge his contributions to advancing mother tongue education, to generate debates that contribute to public discourse, to promote intellectualism in a period where bites and indifference to reading, to critical analysis, to appreciating the role of knowledge and intellectuals in our society has become a deficit. And therefore, without any hesitation, as UNISA, we deem it imperative to promote intellectualism and to stimulate intellectual dialogues on literary discourse and contemporary issues, as well as to advance UNISA's social media impact through teaching and learning, engaged scholarship, research and innovation, including a major commitment to forming global citizens who care about the plight of humanity as they do about the plight of the world. And to advance in particular our own mission as the University of South Africa, that of commitment to shaping futures, especially using Africa's knowledge systems, philosophies, civilizations as the locus of enunciation and a vantage point, whilst also recognizing other knowledge systems that dialogue, contest, and enhance our knowledge systems. Neville Alexander, a true non-dogmatic Marxist, a Pan-Africanist and an internationalist as he described himself. He remained unwavering and true to his conviction until the day he breathed his last breath. His intellectual contribution centered mainly around what is often referred to as the national question, with a particular emphasis on language, education, culture, the struggle against racial capitalism in South Africa and in the continent. And I would dare say this is a continental question. What do we do about knowledge? How are our languages enabling us to projecting our thought systems in ways that we produce knowledges, products, processes, systems that change and resource society? His ideas on the topic of nation building and attended subtopics around racial prejudice, attitudes, and categorization were honed in the fierce debates with fellow prisoners 46664 Nelson Mandela on Robben Island. They were later to be crystallized in a book, One Azania, One Nation, The National Question in South Africa, which he published after his release from prison under the nom de guerre Nosizwe. Indeed, from his youth days and into adulthood, Dr. Alexander was a fierce opponent of evil apartheid regime, whose activism earned him a decade-long prison term on the notorious Robben Island prison. However, this did not deter him nor break his never say die or spirit, as he continued relentlessly with his activism in prison and even after his release into a 5-year period of house arrest. He simply refused to stop until the battle was won and democracy won and freedom claimed. His activism continued into the post-democratic South Africa, where he became a fierce critic of the democratic government. Alexander was never shy to criticize and lament about the palpable collapse of the promise of freedom. Fueled by the acts of rampant corruption and greed, breakdown in service delivery, and total disintegration of the moral fiber of our society. For this, he became unpopular with many in the echelons of government, but he was equally loved by many in society, especially those on the grander side of economic problems. Program Director, it is therefore fitting that for the 12th annual lecture in his honor, we have chosen a topic on the state of the economy to guide our conversations this evening. This topic is not far removed from the issues that foreground Dr. Alexander's activism and for which he fought for. In the final analysis, his struggle was essentially against racial capitalism or rampant greed. It is equally fitting that our guest lecturer this evening is none other than Professor Bonang Mohale, a patriotic Southern African, an African and a leader and a global citizen whose love and passion for South Africa, the continent, and the contribution of the continent into the global world is known. His recent book on leadership, on lifting as we're rising, is a testament to the commitment and the voices of reason that shape the national discourse on matters of critical importance, especially on the political and economic trajectory of our country, our continent, and how we need to overhaul our economic system so that economic development, social justice, access to the rights that were promised in obviating and overcoming apartheid are accomplished. And in his own words, he recognizes that unless we collectively come together as government, business, institutions of higher learning, individuals, collectives, business, and other activists in the social circles, we cannot succeed. And therefore, we're quite excited, elated, and looking forward to the wisdom that the Chancellor, Professor Bonang Mohale, will share with us. Let me resist the temptation to do a full introduction of Professor Mohale as our guest speaker, as that task has been formally assigned to somebody. Safe to say that we could have entrusted the task of speaking on this topic to really the best amongst us. We are quite appreciative. He speaks at a time when the very topic has become burning platform in the country, against the backdrop of a country reflecting on its successes and challenges over the last 30 years of democracy. We're also pondering the trajectory the country's economy must now take to ensure that the democratic dividend is enjoyable by all citizens. I must, however, hasten to add that the other topic, which is currently the subject of national interrogation, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which deals with matters of language and curriculum, which were at the heart of Dr. Alexander's pursuit of answers to the national questions of language and culture and their relevance to scientific development as they are to economic transformation. Had he been alive today, I have no doubt this voice would have been heard loud and clear in the raging debate about this critical issue. It may thus be worthy of his memory to also reflect a bit on this critical subject matter in our conversations tonight and beyond. But it is equally important, drawing on him, to learn as academics, as intellectuals, as students, the idea of social analysis, social participation, and knowledge being at the center of thought systems and not sloganeering as important imperatives. The anti-intellectual posture that is often projected against those who analyze and propose trajectories for development for the continent and for those countries that are divided or who suffer the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, racism, and global marginalization, including the wars that are raging, the climatic changes, as well as the indifference to the neighbor, are critical elements that we would like to pay attention to. Let me, as we welcome us to Dr. Alexander lecture, I urge you to sit back, to enjoy, to listen. Welcome to UNISA. Welcome to the home of leaders, the University of the Land, the university committed to working with all progressive leaders of the academy, of business, of government, of publics, and of civic society in building through knowledge our society, our continent, and contributing the best in our society. Welcome. We wish you all the best, and we hope we will draw from your lesson, Dr. Professor and Chancellor Bonang Mohale. And so I extend to all of you virtually and in person all the best. Please enjoy. Let's enjoy, and let's ensure that we draw on those lessons and we reflect not only orally, but also textually, for universities are around the production of knowledge through books, but also through experiments. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Lenkabula. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of the Land, the University of South Africa, the university in whose vision statement affirms that the purpose of education is to make us more humane, is to create humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have another round of applause for Professor Lenkabula? We will now break for a music item. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have another round of appreciation for our musicians? Thank you very much. We will now, next on our program, we will call on our acting registrar, Professor Supporter, and he will be doing some remarks, some commentary. Welcome, Professor Supporter.
Thank you, Program Director, and allow me to endorse my VC's protocol. Let me just say, protocol observed. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Or I'll try again. Good evening. Thank you. More than a decade ago, we met in Cape Town for the first Neville Alexander Memorial Lecture. I remember very well, the lecture was delivered by Professor Mbulungeni Madiba. And since then, UNISA never looked back for quite a number of reasons. We are told that a life that touches others goes on forever. And I believe that is true, and that's the reason why we are gathered here tonight to commemorate the life of an Afro-optimist who spent most of his life fighting for epistemic justice. And in the process, he touched many lives out there. Neville Alexander dreamt of transforming the world through language. He was aware of the fact that there are many challenges, especially when you think in terms of African languages. What we often hear, we will be told that the languages are not developed to be languages of science, are not developed to be languages of learning and teaching, but above all, we are told that we language speakers don't even love our languages. We look down upon our languages. But despite all those, Dr. Neville Alexander still believed that we can transform the world through our languages. He believed that for us to achieve that epistemic justice, we require a form of life that is informed by the social experiences of people freed from the narrow interpretative practices of a privileged minority. UNISA is proud to be associated with Neville Alexander and, of course, his line of thinking. One of the reasons why UNISA is 150 years old and still going strong is because of its ability to transform itself significantly at every generational point. Not only have we moved with the time from being totally paper-based. You know, when COVID caught us off guard, we were all forced to ensure that it's business as usual. And with UNISA, we were lucky to just jump over from the paper-based to online platforms. And I want to indicate to you that ever since then, UNISA never looked back. Not only did we continue to transform our systems, but amongst others, we even transformed the character and how we do things. Let me just mention a few things that indicated that UNISA believed that we cannot continue to enjoy our comfort zones. The first one, we are all, I guess, aware that according to the 2022 DHET data, UNISA is cited as the leader in terms of producing PhD graduates. We graduate, on average, over 55,000 students every year. For this year, during the autumn and spring graduations, our last one was last week, Friday. We graduated 58,091 students. This includes over 20 judges in Eritrea. And we had our first graduations in Eritrea this year. Our last graduations will be in Ethiopia in December. That's what your university is doing to ensure that it operates and it makes an impact across the globe, not only on the African continent, but across the globe. We also we saw an increased ascendance of females to higher ranks in academia. As we are speaking, we have got more females than males at the level of associate professorship. We also continue to see an increased introduction of African epistemologies in our curricula. I hope wherever Neville Alexander is, he must be smiling that at least UNISA is following in his footsteps. The seed that he planted continues to be nourished, and we will continue to do that. I also want to indicate to you that at the moment we have meaningful research projects at UNISA, especially in our College of Agriculture and Environment Sciences. We have two meaningful projects there under the overall project is the study of medicinal plants. And what is happening there, our colleagues are looking at the value of traditional plants that were used, and specifically those that were used for diabetes. We know that diabetes is one of those common diseases that are killing people now, and UNISA felt that no, we need to do something to ensure that we contribute towards the economy, but also the welfare of our nation. The other one is on ailments to do with reproductive challenges. These are the two projects that our College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences are working on, and we believe that the community, the country, and of course the globe will benefit from those. Now, in order to achieve that, we realize that just as Alexander wanted to transform and develop the world for the benefit of many or for the benefit of all, the university felt that it also cannot operate on its own. It cannot operate in isolation. The university, therefore, needs, and in fact is exploring how we can contribute to each other's ability in order to develop and produce what is required by the world. And we are joining hands with both the private and the public sector. And for us to achieve this, the best way to go is to collaborate with all business leaders, all institutions, and all interested parties. And you know, as UNISA, we have got regions across the country and even abroad. So don't be surprised when you see UNISA colleagues come knocking at your doors, negotiating for partnership. This is the best we can do as a nation. If we want to go elsewhere, we need to go as a group, not as individuals. And UNISA is aware that there is no shortcut to any place worth going. So it will take time. We will need your support. We will need you to join hands to be with us. In short, let me say, your university, UNISA, as our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Pulen Lengabula, indicated, we are proud to welcome you all here tonight. And we want to say to you, we'll never ever take for granted the fact that you listened to our call and you left your schedules and you are here. We don't take that for granted. And thank you for listening to me, and we wish you all of the best. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much. That is our acting registrar, Professor Supporter. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have another round of applause for those reflections? Professor Supporter, thank you very much for reminding us of some of UNISA's achievements, but also for reminding us that we can transform the world through language, because language is alive, right? And to continue on the theme earlier, what we said about the purpose of education is to become a human being. And think about it, when a child is born, in fact, the research is showing now, while the child is even in the mother's womb, the child's movements in the mother's womb respond to the sound of the mother. And that is why when the baby is born, you will find that the process of language acquisition has already been developing inside the mother's womb. So in other words, by being a human, we are automatically connected, because even the process of learning a language is a process in which we become more human. So on that note, I am now going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Zama Kanyile. She's an educational psychologist. She joined us earlier this year from KwaZulu-Natal. She joined UNISA, Paro Campus, and she is our Senior Counselor, Career Counseling and Development in the Western Cape region of UNISA. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Kanile, and she will be introducing our speaker for this evening. Dr. Kanile, the stage is yours.
Esteemed colleagues and honored guests, it is an honor to have you join us for the 12th Neville Alexander Annual Memorial Lecture, a momentous occasion dedicated to reflecting on the profound legacy of Professor Neville Alexander, whose work continues to inspire us in our quest for knowledge and social justice. I would like to extend a special greeting to the Principal and Vice Chancellor, Prof. Puleng Lenkabule, Acting Registrar, Prof. Sipota, Acting Deputy Registrar, Prof. Moroka Mahashua, Acting Western Regional Director, Dr. Jansen, our distinguished guest speaker, Prof. Bonang Mohale, Professor of African Politics, Prof. Evaristo Paniera, Acting COD, Department of Curriculum and Instructional Studies, Professor Patience Mutau, Professor Musa Mushabela, the VC of UCT, as well as all our esteemed guests and colleagues. It is my honor to introduce our distinguished guest speaker for the evening, Professor Bonang Mohale. Professor Mohale is a Chancellor of the University of Free State and a former President of Business Unity, South Africa. He currently serves as a Professor of Practice at the Johannesburg Business School within the Faculty of Business and Economics. In addition, he is the chairman of two prominent listed entities, the Bidvest Group Limited and ArcelorMittal, as well as Swiss Corporate Solutions Africa and SPV Services. A highly respected leader on the global stage, Professor Mohale is a member of the community of chairpersons at the World Economic Forum. He is also a celebrated author of two bestsellers, Lift as You Rise and Behold the Turtle. His commitment to uplifting others has been widely recognized, including with a Presidential Award in 2001 for his servanthood in South African industry and the economic empowerment of previously disadvantaged individuals. In 2024, Professor Mohale received the African Union's Lifetime Achievement Award at the Africa Career and Gala Awards, acknowledging his exceptional contributions to society. He was also honored with the Special Presidential Business Leadership Award from the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology of South Africa for his steadfast commitment to ethical leadership, social justice, and economic transformation. Among his numerous accolades, he received the ME Vision Academy Awards exclusive recognition in successful leadership in 2023. Professor Mohale's influence extends far beyond our borders. He was recently named one of the 100 most reputable Africans by Reputation Poll International, an acknowledgement that reflects his integrity, reputation, transparency, visibility, and impactful contribution to society. Tonight, Professor Mohale will present his insights on the topic, the state of the economy. Please join me in welcoming Professor Bonang Mohale.
To this day, Dr. Neville Alexander still allows us to sit in the discomfort of the fact that many philosophers have succeeded in interpreting the world in various forms. The point he made, though, is that it is our job to change it. To this day, his words ring true not only in our minds, but in our hearts, that it is about time that those that love peace learn to organize as effectively as those that love war. 30 years into democracy, wherever he is, walking beside us every moment, surely he should be less than happy about what we have become, because he knew that we are much more than what we have become. Yesterday was the anniversary of Zambia, 60th anniversary. He would have reminded us that in 1965, African countries made donations to those countries that were less fortunate than them. Amongst them is South Korea and Singapore, but also Germany after the Second World War. 20 years later, all of these 5 countries that received aid from Africa were giving aid to other countries. 60 years. African leaders are meeting about how to better ask for newer forms of aid. Years into democracy, poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face. And the definition of black is found in our founding statutes. That is all those who have been excluded on the basis that they are not white. That if wealth is the inevitable outcome of both hard work and enterprise, then every woman in Africa should be a dollar billionaire. It is clear that we were so eager to get into political office that we didn't think deeply and profoundly about what is it that we are going to do when we get this political power. Pretty much like a dog chasing a car without giving much thought to what would happen if the car stopped. Because all we had to do was to dismantle that made us to be who we are. Because black poverty, it's not an individual failure. It's a systematic, chronological, and methodological process that makes it impossible for any of us to raise our heads above the parapet. This dilemma was faced by the National Party in 1910 when the dilemma was, do we give this country to the African intellectuals that were better farmers and were better educated? Or do we leave it in the hands of the white male Afrikaners? And for the British to answer that question, they simply had to remind themselves who they are and what they are about. And since then, the structure of this economy was set in concrete. Number one was to ensure that we continue to be a supply of a crucible of cheap labor. Number two, that we must risk life and limb to go to the belly of the earth to get this gold, and they will have the first right of refusal. The last was, we will dig the diamonds, but the people that will determine the price will be them, hence the formation of the London Sales Organization. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world that you grow your own potatoes with your own water on your piece of land. You even talk to them. And once you are finished on the side of the road, then the buyer comes and says, we will tell you at what price we will buy these tomatoes. That has not changed. 30 years into democracy, when you look at all the indices, they demonstrate beyond any shadow of doubt that we are the first African country to become free, and we didn't do these three things. Number one, exponentially increase the level of our education. I mean, since when is 30% an acceptable pass mark? Number two, that we are the only African country that has not increased the ownership of the economy by at least double digit by the indigenous people that were excluded from participating. Lastly, we are the first African country to be free from colonialism. Just after 30 years, we have taken this freedom, have given it to our colonizers and to the racists. And yet it was very clear why the struggle of African people. Number one, in 1912, when the Union was formed, it excluded the black people. And because of that exclusion, the African National Congress was formed out of 5 diverse organizations that represented the excluded, the marginalized. And it was formed for self-determination, that we want to oversee our own poverty. In 1913, the National Party government rewards the African National Congress for being formed with the 1913 Land Act, which was the 10th land expropriation without compensation, only against African people. So it was on the 27th of June, 1955, in Kliptown, that we came together again and said, but we're not making any progress. And we formed the Freedom Charter with the 10 principles. The 8th says, and the land shall belong to those who work it. Because land is the primary means of production, when energy is the 4th means of production. It is no accident that in the 400 MPs of our first democratically elected president, Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, that of all those cabinet ministers, the one that has the least budget was land. The one 30 years into democracy that still does not have a permanent judge is land. Because we focused on other things, not the primary reason why we lost our kith and kin, flesh and blood. We spent 9 months wasting time to amend Section 25, Article 3A of the Constitution that speaks about land reform. And yet when you read that part in our Constitution, it is crystal clear. The 8th line from the bottom says, when conditions of fair and equitable have been adequately fulfilled, compensation can be down to 0. And it goes on to articulate what is meant by land reform. It says it is land redistribution, land restitution. Lastly, it talks about this notion of security of tenure. Because as daughters and sons of farm laborers, those that owned the land, even if you have spent 69 years on that farm, they would wake up on one morning and say, leave my land. Therefore, we are poor by choice, not by divinity, by the choices we are making, the choice of leadership that we make. Because even now, when you look at the 29th of May outcome of our election, it is very clear what all of us voted for. And in case you have forgotten, allow me to remind you that yes, the ANC was humiliated from 57% to 40%. It's not a 17 percentage points drop. It's 29.7% drop. When you lose support for your company to the tune of 30%, in business would have fired you. The other 15% was voted for MK Party, which was a miracle. It has never happened in this country that a party is formed in 5 months and it gets 15% of the vote. So between those two, that's 55%. They could have formed a coalition government. The EFF's 11% came down to 9%. When you add those three, that's 64%. They could have changed the constitution if they wanted to. And the point is not the fact that all 3 parties are black. The point is that all 3 of them come from the same womb. . We are reminded of the words of the founding father of the African National Congress and the first recipient, laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize, Chief Albert Luthuli, when he says, you don't want even your fiercest enemy at their point of their most weakest to exclude you as an option. Since when did we decide that MK is a worse enemy for our cause than the DA? At what point did we say the EFF is a worse enemy than the DA, a party that has no demonstrable track record of collaborating with anybody at any level? A party that disagrees with us on everything. They disagree with us on all the progressive labor laws that we put in place, and labor had to go out on the streets and strike for every single solitary one of them. They disagree with us on the Bella Bill, whose job it is to fundamentally challenge this notion of independence, but also of language policy, which is an excuse to exclude those that are less fortunate. They disagree with us on the national health insurance because they don't want to accept that it is one of the fundamental human rights. In its broadest terms, it's referred to as universal and equitable access to health care. Who'd argue against that? We don't agree with them on foreign policy. Dr. Neville Alexander would have reminded us that yes, we like quoting Russia. We are in Russia as we speak, as part of the BRICS gathering. These 5 countries that have now increased by 13 more. And yet, in choosing to quote China, we forget that there are 1.4 billion people. And their cabinet, it's 1/10 hours of 63 million people. That the entire command structure consists of people, every single solitary one of them have a university degree. That China is not chasing 1,001 objectives, often with conflicting priorities. China has only one problem, and one problem only. It's 1.4 billion people. And as a result, that informs the strategy of China. It then informs the foreign policy of China. If you are a country, you've got your own minerals, and you're not helping them to solve the 1.4 billion people, China is not interested. That's why when Lesotho looked at them to say, we want to build the new headquarters, the Lesotho National Development Corporation, China says, how much do you need? They wrote it down. How long do you want this by? And they said, we'll build it with our own people, because they were solving the 1.4 billion people. Dr. Neville Alexander would have reminded us that what we were fighting for in 1912 and in 1955, it's exactly what we were still fighting for on the 27th, which then became the 29th of May, 1994. That then ended up with our constitution being referred to as the best in the world. And it's not 1,001 things. On the one hand, it's about improving the quality of lives of the majority of our people. On the other hand, it's a better life for all, not just for the elected officials. That's all it is. So when you look at the data, 63 million of us, 30 million South Africans live below the poverty datum line. 9.7 million young people live below the poverty datum line. 10 million young people are not in education, employment, and training. Six million boys have never seen their fathers. We inherited this country and less than 2 million people were on social security. Before COVID hit, there were 18 million of us on social security, and we wear it like a badge of honor when our job was to create jobs so that our people can reclaim their self-worth and their self-respect, because there is no nobility in being poor. When we were hit by COVID and we announced the 500 billion economic response to the pandemic, we also introduced the social relief of distressed grants at 350. It's now 14 million people applied and 10.5 million people were put on. And it increased our people on social security to 28 million people. How? Even when we close our eyes, can we refer to that as progress? We have reclaimed our position as the number one biggest country in Africa. But our GDP, even though the World Economic Forum and the World Competitiveness Report at the very best measure only 60% of economic activity that happens in the continent of Africa. In South Africa at number one, it still puts it at 400 billion US dollars. It was the same in 2011. In real terms, it means your discretionary purchasing power and your disposable income buys less now compared to 2011. And I'm not even including the population growth on average, which is 1.5%. For the last 10 years, the GDP has been growing at 1%. In the last 4 years, at less than 1%. We now hold the world record for all the wrong reasons. We are the country with the highest cash in transit heist in the world. This last quarter, we had 3,752 cash in transit per quarter. That's more than Brazil has had in the whole year. We've taken over a lot of things from Brazil. In 2010, we took over from Brazil as the most unequal society in the world with a Gini coefficient of 0.63. We're the country with the highest unemployment rate in the world. We even hide it to ourselves. We have a narrow definition that excludes those people that have looked for a job in the last 36 months. And then there's an ILO explanation, which includes everybody else. So in the 750 days of national lockdown, who would have looked for a job because you couldn't as much leave your front gate? So of the 12.75 million people that are gainfully employed, almost 10 million are unemployed. Of the 7.7 million people who own their own homes, 10 million live in those homes, but they don't own them. Because they don't have the title deed, therefore can't go to the bank and raise funds to be able to start their own businesses. Just soon we'll be told that black people are poor, or lazy, or both. We are the country with the highest suicide rate in the world, second only to China. The country with the highest GBVF rate in the, not by a factor of 2, but 5 times the global average, to demonstrate that we haven't even started dealing with our collective trauma and the brutality of the self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty. If you are a politician, they'll tell you about triple challenges. As a businessman, I know there's only one challenge. It's stubbornly high levels of unemployment, period, that then lead to increasing levels of poverty. Because if you're unemployed, you're poor, which then leads to increasing levels of inequality. And let me remind you, when we talk about inequality, we are really talking just about income inequality. We don't include asset inequality. We don't include wealth inequality. Because if we did, I swear to God, there'll be a revolution in this country. We chose to be members of BRICS. New jobs created by SMEs in the BRICS countries is north of 60 percentage points. New jobs created by SMEs in this country, it's south of 15 percentage points. It takes, on average, 3 years to form a new business at the cost of 350,000 rand. In Singapore, it takes 2 hours, not 2 days. The 350,000, you use it to buy goods that you can sell, and you start trading on the third day. You see, you have to love your people to lead them. How do you love your children when 30 years into democracy, in 2018 you said there were 3,926 pit latrine toilets. In that year, 5 young kids of 5 years or younger died a sad, tragic, and regrettable death in those pit latrines. 30 years into democracy, we have got a new minister that says, I've got a new plan. Of the almost 300 that we have, we're going to eliminate them in another 2 years. Haven't we heard that before? And how does this manifest? Dr. Neville Alexander would look at the figures, the scholar that he was, and confirm that this inequality is widening, that racism is at an all-time high, that it is black graduates that are roaming the streets hopelessly. Because Napoleon Bonaparte reminds us that leaders are dealers in hope. When people lose hope, that's when they wake up in the morning and say, on a composite basis, tomorrow can be substantially better than yesterday. I have to make another plan. I never thought that in my life, the people that sit on the top of the food chain, clinicians, doctors, after 6 years of hard study in Gauteng, 972 of them can't be employed because 70% of the budget of Gauteng goes to paying salaries. They can't even be GPs because they haven't done the 2 Zuma years. Therefore, they don't have a license to be able to eke out a meager salary. If you understood that some families had to sell their 15 cattle to send these to school because you are not our second but our last hope, now they look at you every day and say, but you were qualified. And yet the roof is still falling. Public education has collapsed. Public health care continues to fail the poor and the vulnerable. Crucial infrastructure that we inherited from people who don't even like us is laying in decay. Here in the Western Cape, there's a central line. People have put in informal settlement shacks in the middle of the railway line. And there's not even an enforcement of local laws. I live in Bryanston, and not far from where I live, there's used to be a station called Ruodiport. They started by stealing the 380 volts overhead. Not at night when people were sleeping, but in the middle of the day, and then they took the rails. And then one brick at a time. Today you go to Ruodiport station, it's there. And yet we said we are going to be a country of laws, not a country of men. Lawlessness has now become an epidemic. You've got an 80% chance of pulling a job and getting away with it. That's 1,430,000 times better than playing the lotto. So it was that Whitley Phipps, at the time that we thought it wasn't going to happen, talking to people that look just like us, reminded us that it was the rule of law that the slaves could not play the white keys on the piano. All the Negro spirituals were composed using only the black keys. He went on to stand up and take a stage that looked similar to this one and play a John Newton classic called The Amazing Grace, composed with only 5 keys. We are daughters and sons of warriors. We've got much more than just 5 black keys. Imagine what we can achieve collectively as a people with great natural endowments, because we're not meant to be like this. Harriet Tubman is a slave abolitionist. She opines that I could have freed 1,000 slaves. Because I freed 1,000 slaves, I could have freed 1,000 more. Only if they knew that they were slaves.
Professor Mogale, thank you very much. I'm saying thank you because in order to move forward, we have to look back. In order to be able to find the solution, we have to look the problem squarely in the face. And it's so hard to do that. And so I am saying thank you to you for helping us to articulate that which we most want to ignore, that we spend so much energy avoiding, to see exactly some of what you were so eloquently describing. Ki a leboga. Thank you very much. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to be in the shoes of the 2 discussants. Wow. You have quite a big job now to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, our 2 discussants who's going to be responding to Professor Mogale, and many of us are feeling, we need therapy now. Yay! And so I'm going to summon the 2 therapists onto the stage. And their names are Professor Evaristo Beniera, Professor Beniera from the Department of African Politics, UNISA. Please take a seat. And he will be joined by, he will be joined by Professor Patience Mudau, the Acting COD, Department of Curriculum and Instructional Studies, UNISA. Thank you very much. So, we have all now been put in touch with some of the harsh realities of South Africa. all right? We are confronted with the truth. And so we have now summoned our healers, our therapists, and they are going to try and make sense of some of the hard truths that Professor Mohale has so eloquently just articulated. I'm not sure who's going to start, who's going to do the honors. So, Professor Evaristo, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Thank you very much, Professor Mohale. When I was informed that I was to come here and be a discussant to this lecture, I had no idea why they had chosen me. Now I know. Professor Mohale, last month I was in Uganda. A friend of mine asked me, why did you put a capitalist in charge of a developmental state? Those people do not know what it means to go to bed on an empty stomach. They travel with blue lights brigades. When they are sick, they go abroad. They do not die in a public hospital like Ntate Solimuholo. Thank you very much for alluding to the many misalignments in our economy. You spoke about the misalignment between the Constitution and the lived experiences of our people. Even the misalignment between our education system and what we require as an economy. I want to contextualize my response by putting forward the concept of social death as a response by the state to the problems that we, the poor people, present. So a story is told in Iraq that there was so much unemployment that the cabinet went to President Saddam Hussein and said, President, people are uprising. They need jobs. Saddam Hussein said, it's not a problem. Call them to the stadium. We will make a solution there. All the unemployed people were called to the stadium. The army was instructed to shoot them. Problem solved. There's no more unemployment in Iraq. We have got a version of that in South Africa, this idea of social death, where there is a dual economy. Some will say a formal economy and an informal economy. There are people that are not counted in South Africa. They live on the margins of the state. Professor Mohale, we have a problem in South Africa of a double epistemology, where when I wake up, I am a Shona man from Zimbabwe. I eat my pap from yesterday. We call it munya. And then when I get to the university, I must get into this mode of being a professor. I must speak the perfect English. I must chew with my mouth closed. I must not put my elbows on the table. All of us live a double epistemology. So there is a misalignment not only at the level of the economy, but also even at the individual level. That then the problem is no longer at a higher level, but even the problem of the self fighting with the self, where the self becomes self-contradictory. If you ask me right now who is speaking, Is it Evaristo Benyera, the Shona man? Is it this guy who ran away from Robert Mugabe? Is this professor of African politics? Kimang Kuluma. Now, when the self is self-contradictory at that level, how can it march towards uniting with the other selves? Those that have the ability to do that will then embark on what Professor Mohale was alluding to, the idea of elite preservation. The idea where somebody with a Rolex watch will say, we are hungry here. We have a problem in Africa of misrepresentation. They take our problems, they present our problems as if it is theirs. So, when they fought for the state, it's not because they wanted to liberate us. It's because they were denied entry into whitehood. Therefore, they came to us and mobilized us to fight with them. When we defeated those ones, they then abandoned themselves. Those ones are defeated, we are abandoned. Now we have a problem of Emerson Mnangagwa and his family. We have the problem of Yoweri Museveni and his son, General Muhoozi. We now have this tendency in Africa that people liberated us in order to enslave us. Let me also allude, Professor Mohale, to something that you touched on briefly. The empire, which is the structure of our problems, is not static and ignorant. So what the empire did was that when it faced a challenge, the political empire, by this I mean the French colonies, the British colonies, the Portuguese colonies, the Italian colonies, they did not remain there. When the empire was threatened by the processes of decolonization, it mutated into something new. It became an economic empire. Therefore, the problem was no longer the British Empire, but petrol was now coming from BP and Shell. The bank was now Barclays Bank, that bank which was started by profits from slave trade. So the empire became an economic empire. When we started agitating for the control of the economy, the empire did not stay there. Today, as I speak to you, the empire is an epistemic empire. It is a cognitive empire, because the fight today is about knowledge production. Who has the right to produce knowledge? And who does not have the right to produce knowledge? Whose knowledge counts as knowledge, and whose knowledge does not count as knowledge? If you write a PhD thesis and you do not quote Karl Marx, what are you doing? Do you want to fail? Yet Karl Marx never set foot in Africa. Karl Marx never wrote for us. We are actually stealing. So we have got a lot of misalignments. And this is how the empire operates. My plea is that as we go to our... The empire is now interfering with my communication. As we go to our different spheres, we must be cognizant of the many misalignments that are there. Lastly, there is something that is called coloniality. Coloniality is the continued asymmetrical power relationships between the former colonizers and the former colonized. In other words, why is it that Zimbabwe is independent, but Britain continues to sanction Zimbabwe? Why is it that Zimbabwe cannot sanction the United Kingdom? Why is it that when we have elections in Malawi, the Americans will come and observe and certify our elections? And why can't we as Malawians go to observe elections in America? That is what we call coloniality. We have a problem in that we are not aware of the fact that colonialism simply mutated. It enters into institutions. Now it is the United Nations Security Council which will pass a resolution. Thank you very much to the family of Professor Neville Alexander. I read some of his work, and some of his work, ironically or interestingly, inspired my inaugural lecture, which I gave some time ago as a professor of African politics. And I was responding to this question: if we are free and independent as Africa, why is it that our lived experience is actually becoming worse? If somebody who died during apartheid would wake up today, they would not believe that apartheid ended. Because situations are now worse today than they were during that time. The railway line was bifurcated, black people here, white people here. Today the railway line is no longer there. He said it, it's no longer there. My friend said to me, in Nigeria they steal money from the bank. In South Africa they steal the bank. VBS is no longer there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Evarista. I can sense that the audience is wanting more, but unfortunately, we have to stop there. But before we go to Professor Mudau, you know, the imagery that stayed with me is the imagery that you made of Iraq, of summoning all the unemployed people and shooting them. And I'm thinking that was actually perhaps a far more humane situation than what we are having probably on this whole continent, where people are actually dying a slow death of torture, of what some of the authors call they are living in the zone of non-being. Because that's what you reminded me of saying, talking about social death. That actually, there are many people, in fact, the vast majority of people are sentenced to a slow, painful, torturous death. Because, Professor Mohali, you also used you used this term, abject poverty. I know there are some authors who refers to intractable poverty. In other words, there are so many young people in South Africa that have inherited poverty, and there is no opportunity for them to actually find a life outside of a life of poverty. And that's what Professor Evaristo is talking about, being sentenced to a social death. Thank you so much, Professor Evaristo. Another round of applause for you, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to move on now to Professor Mudau, and thereafter we will open it to you so that we can begin to have a broader conversation. Thank you so much, Professor.
Good evening. They said my name is Patience Mudau, and here we are today. We're talking about a giant who wanted us to use our own languages, that is mother tongue. But I want to share with you today that my name is Lebo, for starters. So this is what we are facing as human beings, as women, that we tend to idolize other people. My mom named me Patience for whatever reasons known to her, and I didn't even ask. But all I'm trying to say to you is that here we are in a country, this is the state of economy that we find ourselves in. By so saying, I want to draw my response or my discussion from the education perspective, Professor Mohali. I am an educator. I was a teacher for a few years, and I joined the higher education. And today we're reflecting on Dr. Alexander, that he was one of those people who fostered us. He was promoting mother tongue. What is happening today? We have our grade R, up to grade 3s. They have to move to when they have to move to grade 4, the poor kids have to change the language altogether. What does it do to our own economy? Because they struggle to comprehend, they struggle to understand the language, and in future it affects their careers. That is the one thing that I've come to realize, that they need to, imagine as a learner that you need to understand that this is in English, mathematics. At home, you play morabaraba, for example. Then when you go to school, it's not morabaraba, it's something else. And you need to shift your mind. This is what I believe that Neville Alexander was trying to show us, that for us to grow our economy, we need to be proud of ourselves first. We need to embrace who we are. Firstly, our mother tongue, our languages, our cultures, and where we come from. 3-4 days ago, I was listening to Professor Mashudu Shifularo from University of Pretoria. He is one of the first surgeon to do an ear operation. And he was explaining how they are educated from Venda. Not that because I'm married to Venda people. He was simply saying to us, you know, when you go to Venda, you will never find, it's very rare that you find a mukuku. I don't know if you would agree with me. It's because they knew that we are the minority and we need to do something about ourselves, educate ourselves. Most of them, they educated themselves, and what is happening? They can build their houses, they can even come over to the urban areas and be able to take all these other jobs, simply because they understand that without education, our economy is not going anywhere. So what I'm trying to say to you, Prof. Mohali, you mentioned that our graduates are jobless. It's so sad to see a medical doctor without jobs. To see that recently teachers are going to be retrenched from whenever. Where we knew that, you remember when we were growing up, some of us, you will be told that you are going to be a teacher because they knew that there's security there. Where is security? Today we're having 33% of unemployment. We spoke about misalignment. This takes us back to us as teachers, as in education precisely, that we cannot even match what we are teaching with what the labor force want. What are we saying about it, Prof? Are we going to keep quiet and let those who take decisions without even considering us? We talk about having endowers and all that, but at the end of the day, things are just changed. The language policy, yes, it promotes multilingualism, but we are still struggling to make sure that everyone is taught in his or her own language. Or some of the things, like I said, you find some of the things are being explained differently in other languages, but our own languages. So this is basically what Neville Alexander was fighting for, was trying to teach us. And here we are today, we're still struggling to come up with some of the terms for our own, because for example, a cell phone, we'll always call it a cell phone. When we're trying to translate it to another name, it's something else. And we don't feel comfortable to use our own language. So what are we going to do about it? Our graduates are out there. They can't even start businesses because our education system doesn't promote entrepreneurship. It doesn't promote financial literacy. It's high time that we have core curricular activities that talks to financial literacy. Our brothers and sisters are trying to start businesses. What happens to them? 2-3 years down the line, they're not there. Somebody's business just falls by the wayside. How? We don't know, because we don't teach our education system doesn't really, it only teaches us that you need to go and work. what is happening to our economy? We need to go and work every time. You will find a child saying, I want to be a teacher. Yes, it's good to be a teacher. But we also need entrepreneurs. And we don't want entrepreneurs that are just going to bloom, just to come out there like popcorns in the microwave. They have to go all the steps. Not getting tenders because you know someone. Not getting opportunities because you know someone. So that is what I'm saying. Our economy it's really in shambles because we're not doing much about it. I remember a few years back, Julius Malema was saying our economy is simple. We need pap and fleece. It's easier said than done. We need more. We need our children need opportunities. So it starts with embracing our own cultures, languages, and also being confident of sharing whatever in your own language. So we having this. Our employment rate is increasing on a daily basis simply because we don't want to do anything but to go and work. Let us draw from Dr. Neville Alexander that he wanted the economy to grow by us getting educated, but also aligning our education with the industry. We have TVET colleges recently. Back in the years, they were FET colleges, Prof. And those FET colleges, they had programs like plumbing, carpentry, you name the few, just to mention a few. But today, they theorize every curriculum. 80% is theory. Where is the practical part of it? Where is the practical part of it? So we really need to align ourselves, our education to what the industry needs. For example, you find someone studied for a particular program. They end up becoming HR consultants simply because they do not have the skill. They only have the theory. They settle for anything that comes. For me to be a carpenter, it means that if there is no other job, I will just do anything and everything because I don't even have confidence to say, I'm a carpenter. We all want to see our kids going to universities. Not all of us will go to the university. There are skills that are struggling that can grow our economy. That we need to also draw from what Dr. Alexander was saying to us, trying to show to us that we need to work collectively to be able to grow our economy. And it doesn't need us to think that it's not doable. It is doable because we have learned from their experience, their lived experiences and our own lived experience, and we need to move forward. Otherwise, where is our country going? We cannot afford to have our graduates sitting out there not working. And Prof, you also mentioned the issue of the issues that we are faced with. I would say our current government of national unity. I want to believe that the country has spoken, or the people have spoken, and we need to do something about it, Prof. We need to draw from our lived experience of the 29th of May and be able to come together as policymakers, as educators, and all the people that are relevant, and listen to the people. I've heard that we'll be having all these different endowers, and people will be given an opportunity to say whatever that they want to say. But our people are not interested. We need to take ownership, as you said, Prof. Because we do not want to take ownership as people. We just want things to happen. And when things go wrong, we are the first ones to complain. Hence, I say our economy needs us. It needs our positive minds. And also, we can draw strength from, we can draw opportunities from the private sector, from other opportunities from the government, but we need to make sure that we steer them to the right direction. So we cannot be letting down what the likes of Dr. Neville Alexander wanted to see. We cannot be saying that, or be happy that when we go to the township, we see all our spaza shops are being taken over. And we're not doing anything about it because we don't want to do anything. And by having someone who is not who is not a South African to have a spaza shop, it's also a challenge because it doesn't grow our economy. It doesn't help us to a certain extent. So we really need to do something about it. And this we need to do, trying to learn from people like from Neville Alexander, those that he made sure that we save our own country. We make sure that we are all equal. We make sure that we fight for economic equity as a country and not leave everything out there to be taken by all other things, all other people that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mudau. You know what I want to do is, I just want to continue the thread of social death, the thread of how being relegated to the zone of non-being are connected to the economic malaise that Professor Mogale has so eloquently explained. That he even put us, you know, we were all on this couch and we were feeling very traumatized as we started to become in touch with the reality of the social death. So, Professor Mudau, you said something about your name, which I thought was very interesting. You said your name is Patience, but then I didn't get your real name. Is that what you were speaking about? They are both your names. And so, you know, why I'm commenting on the issue of name, because you spoke about mother tongue, right? And how we are led to dislike our own names, our own mother tongue, all right? And how that is then connected to this misalignment between, you said, this misalignment between who we are and between who we really are. Is that what you said, Professor Evaristo? Right? And so in terms of the work of Dr. Neville Alexander, he is saying that we need to practice our languages, all right? And when we practice our languages, we love ourselves. And when we love ourselves, we have clarity around what is our purpose in this world, right? And when we got clarity on our purpose, it means that our education will truly liberate us. Because I also just want to mention Dr. Shlachwayo is from KwaZulu-Natal, and he talks about the university being, what is the word, an enclave of neoliberalism. So even within our universities, getting an education, it furthers our social death. It is part of the many misalignments in the country, right, that we are suffering from, that there is also a disconnection between the university and who we are. And I think Professor Evaristo explained that very well, that he eats his pap or his traditional food when he's at home, and then he's maybe Shona or he's in his own culture. And the minute you pull up at the university, you have to put on another persona, all right? And so then the knowledge that you are getting is not going to bring the relief that we need in terms of truly building our economy. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to open the floor. But before we open the floor for Q&A for questions and comments from you, because we'd like you to participate, I would really like to put your hands together for our two discussants, because I think they did a good job of responding to Professor Mohale. So I would now like to open the floor. Is there a roaming mic? Are there roaming mics? Okay. So can we get the first, how many hands are we going to take before we hand over to the two discussants? How many hands are we going to take? Are we going to start this side and take 3 hands from this side and then hand over to the discussants? Yeah, before we get the first person, the first question, Professor Mohale, may you please join us on the stage? Thank you.
Where will you sit?
No, you sit.
Thank you so much. Good evening to the panels and also to our brothers and sisters who have gathered tonight. I've got a question that I'm going to pose to the panel. My name is Jackson Impala, and I'm a graduate of UNISA and currently working on my master's. Now, I'm going to just take us a little bit back to the word of scripture, which is in the book of Acts, and you are going to understand the context. One day, the apostle spoke to the audience like we are seated, and the message was so powerful in the book of Acts, you know. And the question which was posed to the disciples was, what shall we do? I strongly believe it is the same voice of the sons and daughters of the continent of Africa. You have given us a power of speeches, but our sons and daughters in Ethiopia, Somalia, different parts, by the way, I'm from Zambia, and we are also battling a bigger challenge in terms of what you call like in South Africa as ESCOM, there we call it as ZESCO. 2, 3, 4 days, it's a load shedding, you know? And the sons and daughters of Africa are posing a question, and I'm looking for practical solutions. What shall we do as Africans? Because we want to pull ourselves out of the shackles of Europeans, Americans. We are like now beggars, you know? We've got, you know, I don't want to talk too much, but I've got also a question for our Professor Bonang Mohale. As the chairperson of Bidvest and maybe other companies, in terms of social responsibility, what is Bidvest doing, especially in terms of sponsoring students, you know, in academics and so forth? Are you doing some part also for UNISA students, you know, who are looking for opportunities? So, thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Damaris, and social deaths. The universities are part of it. because there's no way I would want to understand how universities promote lower level workers to earn a livable income if we talk about social deaths. What is there for a person that come in with a grade 8 or a grade 10 and eventually gets a PhD, but there's no promotion? Isn't that part of a social death? Because we're taking people nowhere. We tell them to educate yourself. And education supposedly needs to take you to the next level. I am a witness, it takes you nowhere. It makes you part of that poverty-stricken social fiber of communities. And if we cannot actively eradicate that understanding of the role of higher education in society, then we're going to come back to the 13th lecture and we were not going to fix the previous 12. That's my one comment. Then the other one, where we find ourselves as a government, how many of us in this room have unpacked the, what is this, the state capture? I mean, I was sick to understand that 280 billion rand over a period of 10 years. Hasn't that put us further down in poverty? But we were quiet. We were all complacent. We were all happy. None of us went to Parliament and asked, what is COPA doing? Everybody in this room, most of us in this room, were relaxed. Just the other day, the Department of Health in this province told us that the 253 million rand that they've got under expenditure is a saving. Here help us. How can it be a saving if people are dying on floors in our hospitals? I can say a lot because you have really stirred that activism in me that will not die. Because each one of us needs to be an active citizen, and we need to take our rightful stand, and Parliament is where we need to go.
Yeah, we're going to cut this side. We're just going to finish that corner, then we come in. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Violeto Kachu. I'm from that university by the mountain, and I am in the discipline of linguistics, and I'm doing my master's there. So I would say my research interests are particularly within the pedagogy of multilingualism, language and identity, and I suppose the lack of indigenous languages within the academic space. So my question was to Prof, I think of African politics, rather. So you speak about the idea of double epistemology, right? And the self-contradicting, and then you also mentioned the notion of social death. And I wanted to say that from a university, I would say, I suppose I'm a child compared to everyone else in this space. So as a young scholar, the social death is already there by virtue of us not being able to locate ourselves within locate our experiences rather within the institutional spaces that we find ourselves in. And when reading or engaging in some of Prof. Alexander's work, we see that he's been speaking about the notion of mother tongue-based education and the idea of additive bilingualism and things like that. And so I suppose for me, it's this notion of, I know you made an example to say, you know, at home you're the Shona person, here you're someone else, and I feel that it's a lot like that for many of us because, for example, I grew up in Guguletu, but then from Guguletu I have to leave and I have to become this person in UCT that is socially palatable to the space within itself. I have to engage in scholarly work that I also struggle to understand within the English medium. And I just wanted to ask really, what is the work as the Black scholars and the professors of today that we sort of seek or we want to seek refuge in? What are you going to offer us in the future going forward for us as people who are fighting for our indigenous languages to be seen within these spaces, for us to be able to write within them, for us to be able to take on and kind of imagine the pedagogies of translanguaging, etc. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Very important questions that the young lady is asking. Thank you so much. Shall we just first allow the panel to respond to those questions before we move to other parts of the venue? Professor?
Thank you, Jackson. Muribwanji mwene. Zikomo kwambili tatokoza mwene. I will defer the question about the corporate social responsibility at Bidfest to Professor Mohale, and also your question on what is to be done. The issue of the idea of the social death seems to have resonated with a lot of people here. Have you ever noticed how many societies, many countries that are struggling, there are also drugs in those countries? It's not a coincidence. It is a regime preservation tactic. These young people of South Africa, let's let drugs come in so that they are drugged and they will not think about revolting. They will not ask the question that our master student is asking there. It is not a coincidence that the government is not doing anything about drugs. It's not that they are failing to control drugs. It's a regime survival tactic. It cannot be a coincidence. So, is the university complicit in creating conditions viable for social death? Yes. Well, I still want my salary. But allow me 2 minutes to historicize the university for you. This institution that we are calling the university today is an institution that originated in Africa, in a place called Fez, F-E-Z, in Morocco. The university as we know it today was started by a woman called Fatima. She is the one who started the university as we know it today. And it was appropriated and it was taken to Greece. Then in the gardens, Plato and Aristotle are there. Then the university was again, some would say it was stolen, and it was taken to Europe, at Sorbonne, at Oxford, and so on and so on. I am talking about what I call the many turns of the university. So from this European turn, the university was then weaponized and instrumentalized. It was then re-exported to Africa as part of the colonial project to create compliant black subjects. So it is not a coincidence that in 1964, the University College in East Africa was opened in Uganda, Entebbe, which became Makerere. The University College of Rhodesia and Nyasaland was inaugurated in Salisbury, which became the University of Zimbabwe. There are 6 universities that were opened as part of the British colonial project. So the university by then was now in the service of colonialism. Then came the nationalists. The university then took a nationalist turn, where it was training and churning out these nationalists. At independence, what did we do? We then took those projects. Of course, I'm summarizing, because in South Africa, the university took a very dangerous tribal turn, where there was the University of Gazankulu, the University of Venda, the University of Western Cape for the Coloureds. There were English universities, and so on and so on. Fast forward to today, the university is now a commercial project. There is even a department of commercialization. Students are now clients. If we go back to the origin of the university in Fes, there were 2 things. The university must either create knowledge, prudence, or it must solve society's most pertinent problems. We are not creating prudence today. We are not contributing to the solution of the most pertinent problems in our societies. This is why we have so many unemployed graduates existing simultaneously with so much money and so much unemployment, and money that is being returned by municipalities because there are no people to do those jobs. And pardon me for indulging there. I am now reading from Professor Chinwe Izu Ibikwe. He said there's something called miseducation. To miseducate a black child is to take a rat and you give it the education of a cat, to a point where this rat now thinks that it is also a cat. This rat will now start killing other rats in the service of catwood. It's not me, it's Professor Chinwe Izu Ibikwe. Miseducation. And therefore the solution is an education. Sabelo Ndlovu Gacheni calls it epistemic independence. We need to think and act in our best interest. That is the foremost task before the university today, to train people to think and act in their best interest. The issue of double epistemology. This is coloniality of being at its best, where the black body hates itself and it wishes to be the white. Yes, it's true. So the black body wants to depart itself and become the white. And when it departs itself, it has left itself, but it cannot reach whiteness, because a black person can never be a white person. Now you have left your blackness, but you can't reach whiteness. And you are in epistemic no man's land. You are now an empty slate. I do not want to comment about black women putting other people's hair, because I still want to go home to my wife. I will not comment about that. Please don't misquote me. Don't misquote me. Finally, and this is about the state. You spoke about corruption. And what are we going to do about it? Our problem, why people are not going to parliament too much, is because the middle class in post-colonial Africa is a sellout class. We hate corruption, not because corruption is bad, but because we are not part of the corrupt. The moment that we enter there, we keep quiet. The middle class is a sellout class. The middle class is the problem, because the working class look up to the middle class, yet the middle class is the one that is not contributing to the problem, but it is actually part of the problem. Somebody said to me, Professor, how can you define a thief? And how do you know that you are not a thief? And I said, you don't steal because you are not a thief because you steal. Some of us are thieves, but we just haven't found the thing to steal. The moment that the thing is put there, we all manifest as thieves.
I'm not going to repeat what Prof has just said, but I just want to talk to the gentleman. I just want to talk to my brother regarding funding. I understand that you are a UNISA student, and in terms of funding, there are opportunities also at UNISA. Don't look down on yourself. There is a bursary, and I believe that it's always mentioned at UNISA. It's also, you can get the information online, so maybe you can talk to our registrars here in terms of bursary issues. But I'm not going to respond on behalf of Prof. Mohale, but then for us, we still have room for you to make sure that you get opportunities as well. And in terms of the issues related to issues of corruption and drugs and all that, it's because we allow some of these things because we like to adopt Western culture. I spoke earlier on and said that we don't believe in ourselves so much that we just grab anything that comes out there, and it destroys us as human beings, and also it leads to destroying our own economy. So we need to guard against such and make sure that we, as Prof has indicated, that for us to eradicate some of the issues that are happening, like corruption and all that, we just need to make sure that ourselves do not get involved in such. He mentioned that we are, as long as we benefit, we keep quiet. But when somebody is benefiting, that's when we start talking. So all these kind of issues are putting us in a situation that we are rounding in circle, trying to address issues that we actually do not address. But if we can just make sure that we don't get involved ourselves. Just for example, someone will go to a shop and steal a TV. He goes to someone else to sell it. Why do you buy it? Because it's not a shop. Why? So that is some of the things that we need to be talking about. And sometimes we are our own worst enemies, because we don't want to address issues that are not affecting us or that are affecting us, because we shy away from such as long as we benefit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Mudau. We are now going to give Prof. Mohale a chance to respond. Thank you, Prof.
You know, in business, if somebody gives you a lawyer's letter, you can't respond any other way but through your lawyers as well. So when you throw, I'm a good Catholic boy. So when you throw Acts, let me throw Exodus 18:21 back at you. So Jethro counseled Moses. Remember, Jethro was Moses' father-in-law. To select capable women and men from all people. Women and men who fear God, trustworthy, who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands. So what needs to be done? First, I think if we don't think for ourselves, we place our future in the hands of others. It is up to us to create our own new world. It can't be that we continue to have foreign converses pour from our lips and foreign robes hang from our necks. I know we don't want to eat at 9, but let me just leave you with one thought. We must build our own businesses and hire our own children, because it is madness to continue to make babies and then send them to a different neighborhood for them to go down on their knees and ask somebody else for a job.
Thank you so much, Professor Mohale. So we will now move on so that we can take the next round of questions. Where are the mics? I've got a question here in front. I've got 2 there at the back. I've got another question here. So there's 4 hands here, and then we will go to that part of the room. So can we have a microphone at this gentleman?
1, 2.
Thank you, Chair. Let me contribute by way of comments to what was a very interesting exposition delivered with eloquence and passion. Bonang, I would have expected no less. So let's put on the table, for the richness of the dialogue that we want to have, some of the key structural constraints that we're dealing with. We're living in a world of unprecedented speed in technological innovations. That's not been part of the discourse yet. And that is creating a data-driven economy, explosion of AI and Gen AI as new sources of value creation. Okay? We see the use cases in telemedicine, online education, remote working, and even e-hailing services. It's all pervasive, it's around us. There's also major production and consumption shifts that are taking place as we drive to decarbonize the economy. Okay? In our response to climate change, we see this in the energy sector, we see this in green buildings, oil and gas, transport and logistics, even in sustainable financing. So the world we live in is not the same world and is not going to be solved at the same level of thinking as that which we've gone through. I'm raising this because the old industrial economy is buckling under the strain of new employment creation taking place at the high-value, knowledge-intensive end of the spectrum. Okay? That is complemented by informalization of jobs at the bottom end of that spectrum. Okay? So in this new society, there's increasing inequality due to access to knowledge, to wealth, to income. For South Africa, it is particularly dire because we start with inherent inequality, and in a sense, we stand behind the line when you compare us to other societies. So this is the nature of the problem. So no wonder the graduates of UNISA are not employed. If they're not responding to where the value curve sits in the economy right now, they're not going to have jobs. So, perhaps before I come to the question of what is to be done, needless to say, we have an unimpressive track record as a country in human capital development, a cornerstone of any economic transformation agenda. So what do we need? There's a saying that any and every society gets the leadership it deserves. So we've got to ask very searching questions about our own society. We need a leadership that is equal to the task, that is ethically sound, politically savvy, and technically competent. We need an unwavering commitment to excellence and perhaps change our rather strange relationship with excellence at the moment. Bonang, you mentioned the size of the cabinet team in China. Not only that, if you look, you see splendid excellence in academic and professional fields in order to lead that society. We don't match. We need a conscious and a deliberate commitment to build a growing economy. These issues we're talking about are not going to be resolved in an economy that for a decade has been growing at 1%, less than 1% for the last 3-4 years, with a population growth rate at 1.5% of it. Look carefully at our 3-year budget plans. They're projecting that this economy will grow at 2% level in 3 years ahead of us. That is a tacit acceptance that in that time period we would not have gone far in solving the problems we're facing today. Because if we had solved them, then the growth rate would be north of 2. And so these are things that we need, and perhaps a little impatience with one another in the way we're tackling the challenges that we've enunciated. I do believe, Chair, that this is what Dr. Neville Alexander would have insisted on, both in his activism and scholarship. We owe it to him and the heroes and heroines of our land to live to the injunction that we should bequeath to the next generation a better economy, a better heritage, and a better society, so that the next generation can deal with the fortunes and misfortunes of our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Teron, and I'm from Namibia. First of all, I want to thank the panelists for the very interesting discussion. And I believe the same issues that you are having currently is the same issues that we are having in the region. My contribution or question is more as from a mother's side. Dr. Alexander said the first sound is the sound of a mother. So it takes a village to raise a kid. So my contribution will be, we grow up with the intention, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a teacher to be successful. At the end of the day, we measure success with money. So for me is, what can we do as parents to go back to our homes, to teach our kids that as long as you are successful in what you are doing and you are happy, then you will be successful. Because at the end of the day, the government is having a lot of challenges to assist in helping to educate our kids. I know there's a lot of improvement, there's room for improvement, but the gap between the social issues that we are having, we need to go back to our homes, and we really need to go back and tell our kids it's okay not to be a doctor, because now we put our kids through the system of education. You have to study math, you have to study biology, and at the end of the day, as the former panelist said, we don't teach the kids financial literacy, we don't teach our kids the morals that you need to be successful. So at the end of the day, my question is, what can we do to bring back these morals in school and also to help the parents to educate our kids? Then a lot of social issues will be reduced. This is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amen.
Thank you very much. 1, 2. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Jansen, for this opportunity. This table consists of the UNISA Cape Town Alumni Chapter, under the leadership of Mr. Mantre Francois. We thank you for the opportunity to extend the invitation to us. Ours is to contribute and obviously pose the question. Chancellor, thank you very much for a well-thought and thought-provoking lecture that you've given us, but very engaging. We like the crisp and the way you've decided to deliver it to us. We want to continue these discourses going forward and also looking into the issues, because more than anything, what your lecture really contextualized and really dealt with internal issues in a South African context. Most of the lectures speak globally, and which is nice, but sometimes we need to look internally, introspective. What we want to explore as this chapter is the marriage between social death, Professor, and the issue of identity crisis. Africans. The world has evolved in unprecedented ways in terms of science, in terms of technology, including communications, but where are Africans in this? Are we really part of these developments? I mean, we know that in Africa, for instance, out of 54 countries, you have people who don't even know what electricity is. They're still drinking water from those wells, I mean, in terms of that. So we've had MDGs, we are now sitting with SDGs, but where are Africans in this? We also want to bring, Chancellor, to your attention the issue of student debt. That we spoke of a number, millions of young people who are part of NITS, meaning they are not in training, they are not in education and that, but sometimes we need to look into the grassroots of the problem and not take it at the surface level. We have a lot of students. The professor there said we have bursaries within UNISA, we have NSFAS who's funding the bulk of our student population within this university, but we still have students who can't graduate, just like it's happening in our sister universities. What is being done by that? Capitalist has changed color. It's not white anymore. We know our own who, once they get into those positions, they're everything else but not black. And what do we do about that? Because that's the crisis we have. The capitalists have changed color. Some of them are Africans, and they will define themselves in the given sense of the word. But their actions are contradictory to what the regular individual would expect from them in those positions. So can we look into the issue of redefining and contextualizing these concepts of social death and as well as the issue of the identity crisis? We are very much married to the concept of really schools need to adapt to what the professor who's part of the panelists, Professor Modau, suggested, the issue of core curricula, the issue of introducing entrepreneurship skills or entrepreneurial activities and financial literacy, because that's what is lacking. The Chancellor has indicated just in his response now that we need people who will create businesses to employ our own. So we need solutions that are African, Afrocentric, by Africans for the future we want. But how do we get there? What do we want? What is needed in terms of human capital, in terms of resources, but how do we eventually reach that destination? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yes. Is there a mic for her? Yes.
I do have it. Tile. Okay. Molweni dumelang sanibonani, igama lam nguSiwaphiwe. And a very quick one, ndizocela umuntu othetha isiXhosa aphakamise isandla because into endizayicela uba matolike le nto endizayithetha isilungu sam siphelile ngo-9 o'clock ebusuku. But more than anything, the reason why I am doing what I'm doing now, it's the fact that we have all of us here decided into yobana wonke umuntu olapha uyasiva isilungu. Loo nto ithetha uba yonke le nto ithethwa apha uyayiva. So I want to speak about the intention kunye ne-alignment. We speak about multilingualism. Kodwa yona nto siyivileyo apha namhlanje sisirhuwa. Uyaqonda? And in that alignment, are we aligned to the vision that brought us here? Yokuba multilingualism is the key in education and in other spaces, right? And into endifuna uyithetha ileyo ba, because of what has happened here, kumzekelo woba why are we not confident in being us in these spaces? Because we are not catered for. There's no modeling for us into yobana ndithi ndizawuthi xa ndithi ndingumXhosa ndicela uthetha isiXhosa kule ndawo ndikuyo. I understand that majority of the people here feel excluded. That's exactly how someone who does not speak English feels when in a room. Everyone speaks everything and not their own language. I'm not going to go to Mandela. I'm sure we all know that one by now. Right. The other thing I just want to raise in terms of multilingualism and education, Prof. Kilebogile, yes, is that we know what we need to do for us to make sure that language education and language in schools is being done. What we do not really want to do, or what it's difficult to do, is the fact that it takes time. I am sure that maybe someone has thought about the fact that we need translators for people who can't hear, because we've assumed that everyone who's here can hear using their ears. There's no signer, there's no one who's translating whatever is being said here, because singahlala pha kutshona ilanga. And that's true. What we need to do in alignment is to have intention. And the intentions needs agility. There's a lot of projects that are going on that want to do translation, but is it being done correctly? Asas, maybe we do. In my part-time, I'm a translator from isiXhosa to English, and I'm saying this because I've turned... Thank you. I am saying this because I have turned down some jobs where I was required to translate something that I did not understand. Ndingumxhosa. I know exactly how the audience engumxhosa will read what I write. There's standardized isiXhosa, there's colloquial isiXhosa, ukusiXhosa sethu sasekukulethu. Right? So which Xhosa do we bring to school that aligns with what we're gonna be doing outside of isikolo? Which makes us solve the question yoba uzosenzani isiXhosa usifundile nje. It's because there's no alignment in what we learn in school and what we talk about outside school and when we go to the working world. I thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. So that is the last questions. Thank you. We're going to...
Is it working?
Can we just because we'll repeat the rounds just now. But let us just allow our speakers to respond. Thank you.
It's a beauty that this round was full of comments, not questions. Thank you very much. I will start with the last one. The issue about language and intention and alignment. Nami futhi ndathetha ngalokho. Ndathetha futhi. There is no civilization that develops itself using the language of another. In Japan, they speak Japanese. In Korea, they speak Korean. In Turkey, they speak Turkish. In France, they speak French. In Qatar, UAE, they speak Arabic. In Egypt, they speak Egyptian. It is only here that we dream in Sekua. So I cannot overemphasize the idea of language, because a language is a carrier of a civilization. The first thing that colonialism did was to displace languages and epistemologies. So instead of using our own ways of telling time, I am now wearing a watch. Now I don't look at the sun, I just look at my watch. We used to tell the amount of rain that is going to come by the size of mopane worms. If they are short and fat, it means a certain type of rain. Masonja. There are so many ways of doing and knowing that were crowded out, and eventually they are forgotten. If you go to northern Namibia, in Okahanja, Ondangwa, in Okakarara area there, as if you are going to Oshivelo, the Oshawambo people, especially the Ondonga people, because it's very hot there, they build their huts facing a certain direction, slightly sunken in the sand. It's cooler in the house than it is outside. They don't need air conditioner. Ndapopa Shiwambo nale nale. Shirinkepi meme. So, what we have to do, now that we have got English, Ngugi wa Thiong'o spoke a lot about this, that we now have to use English to our advantage, to unite ourselves so that we can hear ourselves whilst we develop our languages. So we are not going to throw away English, we must benefit from it. But we must use it to develop isiXhosa so that it will become a scientific language as well. My last comment. This is something that has been on my mind for a long time. Why is it that 30 years after gaining power, the liberation movement loses power? The case of the liberation movement in office after 30 years has bothered me for a long time. It started with Kenneth Kaunda, then Kamuzu Banda, then ZANU-PF, now here the African National Congress. Now, we are seeing problems in Maputo. They took 2 weeks to count electoral votes. Frelimo is in trouble. What is it with the liberation movement 30 years after independence? Chama Pinduzi is in trouble in Tanzania. We can only assume that the momentum that was left by the colonial project finally came to an end. If a car stops running the engine, it can continue moving a little bit, then after that it will stop. Prof. Mohale, thank you very much for the thought-provoking lecture. I teach first year and second years at the university. One of the modules that I teach is called Understanding the State. It's a first year module. Understanding the State. Ukuti ihini into leo abayibiza ukuthi state. I have come to understand that there are various models of the state. There is a mafia state. Yes, it's there. A mafia state. There is a military state. And what we are seeing in South Africa is what we can call the mining energy finance complex. I do not have time to elaborate on this. You must attend my classes. Thank you.
With regards to issues of languages, I just want to comment and say big ups to my sister over there. You know, if you can remember, just before 1994, many of us took our kids to Model C schools, and we were like, my child is going to speak English. Then when they go home, they have to switch. Imagine what is happening to your child. A 6-year-old grade 1, she struggles with English at school, or another language, let me not say English. And come after school, the mind must now switch to mother tongue. So what are we saying to our kids? We're simply saying English first, mother tongue comes after. It's time that we reflect and think of people like Neville Alexander, that do we really want to move on like that? And as I said earlier, it affects our kids to a point that when they grow up, when they have to express themselves, confidence is not there. And they still have to switch from, by the way, this has been said like this in Sesotho, and when I have to speak to someone, I have to do it, I have to say it differently. I don't say our kids shouldn't know English or shouldn't be fluent in English. What I've come to realize as well is that, our kids can speak English fluently. Do they know how to read? Not even Setswana, even the very same English, because they can like speak it like, I don't know who. But the writing part, it becomes a challenge because we're excited my child can speak English. I am also the guilty parent, if I can put it that, if I can say that. My son can't speak Chivenda, not at all. And I'm proud to be saying he can speak English. And here we are here today celebrating Neville Alexander, saying that he fostered the use of our own mother tongues to be taught or in our own. So it's up to us. It's really up to us. And in terms of moving, maybe if I were to comment on the issue of the misalignment, we still think that we're all going to be professionals. I remember when I was in high school, I would go to my parents and say, my parents were both teachers, but for me to have a secure job, I had to be a teacher. When I tell them that I want to do economics, I want to be an economist, what is that? So it goes back to what you said, that we need to allow our kids to explore what is it that can work for them. And by doing that is to support them, is to be involved in their academic journey, so that you can identify what is best for your child. And with the language that will be proficient in, whether their mother tongue, through your support, and obviously in other languages, I can tell you their career choices, given the support that they get, will be better off. Thank you.
Okay, so we only have one more round to do, but I think there were some people who asked questions that they wanted your response. Will you oblige? Thank you.
I was trying to avoid them. So there was one around CSI, what we are doing at the Bidvest Group Limited. Because it's a lecture, we have to give clever answers. I think we need to be careful that we don't take our children, put them in a dungeon as business, so that we feel good when we throw crumbs at them. The point is to root out and defeat poverty. Bidvest is a listed entity, so you can Google this. I just want to share one observation. So it's a proudly South African company. It's almost 40 years old. It had only one woman on the board. And this woman is now the group CEO of the Bidvest Group Limited. But that's not why I'm telling you the story. I'm telling you the story because Sisnompumelelo Tembekile Madisa, she's now released 4-year consecutive results. She's the first woman and indeed a CEO at Bidvest to declare the biggest dividend in the history of this entity. The very first to breach the 100 billion revenue mark. This last financial year, she posted 123 billion rand revenue, 11.5 billion trading profit. She does this with a board that is 80% black and 73% women. That's the only reason why I tell you this story. In the interest of time, because I didn't think that we'll eat at 9, it's 22 minutes past 9. There's a question around student debt, so that you don't say I'm avoiding it. My boss is... The old Department of Higher Education and Training used to be led by Dr. Bladen Zimande. In 2022, they do a piece of work. And they confirmed that there's 1.2 million students in the 26 public universities. They exclude the 50 TVET colleges. That if we were to educate all of them on a fee-free basis, it will cost us 50 billion rand. But if we only limited it to the households that qualify, combined household income of 300,000 per annum or less, it will cost us 20 billion. But of course, they refer to a smaller problem of historical debt. They put that figure at 16.5 billion, 9.2 billion of which is irrecoverable. And last year, 100,000 young people completed their studies but couldn't graduate because they owe these 26 public universities some money. And the solution is very simple. So I go to my religious brother, my Mukua, that if what needs to be done, I exclude the 3.5 million small and medium enterprises because that's hand-to-mouth, survivalist by nature, and I start only with the 1.5 million medium-sized companies that have a turnover of 300 million and above. And if it's 2010, I would then look at the 400 companies listed on the JSE. Today, there's 298 of them. But if I focus on the 60 companies that hold securities in the 80 private equity firms, all of them, 100% of them, have some sort of a corporate social investment. All of them have about 4 focal areas. 100% of them, one of those 4 has something to do with education. So if we look at the centerpiece of the pupils of their eyes of every single solitary one of these companies, and we don't even ask them to make more money or post more profits, just what their board has already approved. And we say they must put a meager million rand in a historical debt fund. Not in 30 years of democracy. In 1 year, would have wiped off the entire 16.5 billion of historical debt and give these young people their life back so that they can reclaim their self-worth and their self-respect.
Thank you so much, Prof. I just want to make a comment because it seems like there's a vibrancy here and there's quite a lot of interest and quite a lot of gems just in terms of some of the comments that are coming through. However, we're going to have to start cutting it because we have to start serving supper. And so I'm going to allow a further 3 quick, can I? Can't? It's too late. Oh, but that is now so unfair. Sure. And the lady there spoke about intentionality. Sure. Yo. All right. So is it okay if we, okay, it's okay. We're going to cut it. So, but I just want to thank everyone for that, that vibrant interaction. And it does seem like, there's a need for these kind of spaces. People want to hear, this kind of truth. I don't know what Prof. Mohali charges, but we're going to have to speak, some economics maybe about getting this more broad-based discussions. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call up, where's Professor Supporter? You're going to assist us with a gift giving because we need to thank our excellent speakers. They really got our energies going. And even, I also have to go back to the lady who spoke about intention. And I think in a sense, you're also making me think even about the way we're running this. Yes, thank you. And I'm taking the criticism. I'm taking it to heart. All right, okay. Diabonga, sis. All right. All right. So, Professor Supporter, can you please join us on stage? to call my boss, my line manager, the deputy acting registrar, Professor Mohashwa. Thank you, Prof.
What a wonderful evening it was. I'm going to be short. I'm going to do it in just 4 minutes, and to thank everyone by way of doing vote of thanks and closing. On this special day, being the 12th Neville Alexander Memorial Lecture, and I just want to first thank the program director, Dr. Johnson. You ably conducted the program so well. We sincerely appreciate the warmth and the joy and the energy with which you conducted the program. And in your introductory remarks, you indicated the following words: wisdom, knowledge, and culture. And by that, you set the pace for the evening. And thereafter, after we heard your good, interesting introductory remarks, we moved to the corporate video of the university. In the corporate video, I hope many of us, we can note the clarion call by our Chancellor, the Honorable President Mbeki, whereby he indicates, Africa shall prosper, Africa shall rise. This evening is one of those moments where Africa, once again, is reminded, it shall prosper, it shall rise. And also, in the corporate video, we saw the catalytic niche area of the university, the 10 catalytic niche areas. And by so doing, we encourage partnership with our university. Then we moved on to the welcome address by our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula. She ably did a warm welcome address, and one of the 3 points she mentioned in the address is that Neville Alexander is a literary activist, Pan-Africanist, and an internationalist. And to that, we are grateful, Prof. Lenkabula, at the main campus, together with the management that are watching online. We appreciate that welcome address. Then we moved on to whereby our acting registrar, Professor Sapota, addressed us and spoke on 2 key points that I've noted: UNISA transforming itself with each generational point or each generational encounters. And after, he also spoke about UNISA for grounding the African epistemologies. Thank you, Professor Sapota, for those words. And then we moved on as the program unfolded, whereby Dr. Kanyile, warm introduction. Thank you for that. And we appreciate it. You ably represented the Western Cape. And for that, we are sincerely grateful. And you well introduced Professor Bonang Mohale. What can I say? I'm sitting next to him, and I say, when you are sitting next to a great giant, you are not worthy to even bask in his shadow. I'm not worthy to sit next to you. What an honor. What a blessing. You covered key pointers in your address. Some of the pointers you mentioned, I would not like to repeat. It's always not ideal to repeat what the best speaker has said. But 1 or 2 points I would like to mention. You spoke about impressive knowledge. Actually, when you were addressing us, I noticed something. You were not having notes. You were just speaking. And I was listening to the dates to see where you'll make a mistake, and you were not making any mistake. You were just flowing. You were just flowing. And that was wonderful. And you also spoke about the black people poverty, black poverty, as a system and systemic failure. And that was insightful. And the issue of land, redistribution, and restitution. May I not even say more. All that we need to do is all of us, we need to go and buy his 2 books. And I have a sense that your 3rd book is going to be something along in the, what is it? I wrote it down. In the belly of the beast. That's what I sense that your 3rd book is out. Because we are speaking right from, it's like we are full of exciting fire and energy that is uncontainable. And thank you so much, Professor Bonang Mohale. Let's give him a warm applause for that wonderful address. Our 2 respondents, Professor Benyera and Professor Mudau. They spoke of misalignments. I don't want to even elaborate further on the natures of the misalignments that they spoke about. But some of the things you spoke about, Professor Bonyera, about coloniality, and then also as how we are misjoined with ourselves, and also Professor Mudau, you also went further to speak about misalignment. I don't want to spoil the evening by repeating what has been said. Questions and answers. Thank you, all of you, for participating in the questions and answers. And it shows that indeed you were an attentive audience. And may I close by these few words, and thereafter we'll have the dinner. All present, sincerely thank you. You were an excellent audience. No other audience compares with you. Sincerely thank you. You were great. Western Cape region, wow, that is wonderful. Good leadership, Dr. Jansen, and the management of the Western Cape. Please, let's give them a warm applause, Western Cape region, for such a wonderful lecture. Dear team from the main campus, Pretoria, the dear team that do all the corporate events for the university, the managing of protocols and everything. There's a lot of engine preparations behind the scene. Dear team UNISA from main campus and also those from the region, let's clap hands to appreciate the dear team. And another thing that you may not have noticed, the UNISA acting executive director for security is also present, was part of the protocol. They flew all the way to ensure that protocol goes very well. And we thank you so much, Mr. Ketani and the UNISA security team, for the excellent work. The staff, the catering here at the hotel, the President's Hotel staff, sincerely thank you. And one and all that I may not have mentioned by name, those from Namibia that are present here, all the dignitaries, and Mr. Nkutlu from Nedbank, sincerely thank you. And also Professor Moshabela, the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor and Principal from UCT, and any other dignitary I did not mention, sincerely thank you. And then, may the ideals, the consciousness, the activism of Neville Alexander live on. Long live the memorial lectures of Neville Alexander. Long live. Long live. I think I'm going to encourage you that we do it 3 times. Long live the memorial. Let's do it this way. Now, let's do it this way. We're going to do it 3 times after we have dinner. Now I do it, and then all you just say is long live. Now, we do it, I do it this way. Now, I hope, are we ready? Are we ready? Long live Neville Alexander Memorial Lecture. Long live. Long live Neville Alexander Memorial Lecture. Long live. Long live Neville Alexander Memorial Lecture. Long live. Now we are about to have dinner. We're going to ask the first 3 tables where you have the sign reserved to be the first. The doors are going to be open. It's self-service. And have a blessed evening. Travel safely. It was a wonderful evening. Thank you all.